Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're diving into a stack of sources that are wrestling with a feeling I think many of us might recognize, that the world feels a bit, well, out of sorts. Maybe even, as the sources put it, delirious.
Yeah, delirious is, it's quite a description they use. It really tries to capture that strange paradox, where we see all this immense human potential. But it's right alongside just widespread suffering, inequality, environmental damage. They call it an intense and crazy skit.
Right, and they say it's funny because it's true. That really nails that feeling, that sort of absurd dysfunction in the systems we deal with every day. When you shared that idea of delirium, it just jumped out.
Yeah.
And they make a pretty strong connection between this feeling and something called structural violence.
That connection's absolutely key, structural violence. It's a term linked to Johann Galtung, and it's not about like a single punch or attack. It's harm that's, well, it's baked right into the social structures.
Into the systems themselves. Policies, institutions.
Exactly. Economic systems. Things that basically prevent people from meeting their fundamental needs.
And the sources really emphasize how insidious it is because unlike, obvious violence, this structural kind is invisible. It's normalized, operates silently.
Totally silent. But the impact, it's huge. Our sources point out it leads to literally millions of excess premature deaths globally every single year. I mean, far more than wars or homicides combined.
Wow. So things like food deserts, right, where maybe profit motives mean there's no healthy food nearby.
Sure.
Or unequal school funding just based on where you live.
Yeah, those aren't just random issues. They're symptoms, manifestations of this structural violence. They perpetuate this illusion of scarcity and kind of force people into competition.
And one source even brings in that disclosure eyes meme. You know the one. Using it to critique the Federal Reserve in this context.
Right, and the point there isn't just like a casual complaint. It's suggesting that the way "in God we trust" is currently applied, tied to this financial system.
Wow.
It actually ends up reinforcing that scarcity and competition.
Instead of fostering real trust or abundance.
Precisely. It's framed as part of the system that creates the very problem.
Okay, that's a powerful connection. So if that's the problem, they lay out this delirious reality, this invisible structural violence. What solutions do these sources point towards? Where do we go?
Well, they lay out this kind of multi-layered vision for change, and it starts, interestingly, with a really fundamental philosophical shift. They point towards deep ecology, introduced by Arne Naess.
Deep ecology. Okay, so that's more than just recycling bins.
Oh, much deeper. It challenges our whole human-centered view of the world. It asserts that nature, the environment, has intrinsic value in itself.
Right, value separate from how useful it is to humans.
Exactly. It's an ecocentric view, seeing all life as interconnected, interdependent. And deep ecology, in this view, provides the why for a big societal reset. It argues we need changes not just in policies, but in basic economic, technological, and ideological structures.
So it links the planet's health directly to our own society's health.
Yes. And there's even a spiritual dimension mentioned in the sources, talk of a new Zen appeal, ideas of oneness, maybe a common soul.
Interesting. Which seems like a natural bridge to the next layer they discuss. Structural economic change. You mentioned critics like Peter Joseph, Jacques Fresco.
Right. They argue that the current system, tied to that interpretation of "in God we trust" and capitalism, is basically a distorted value system, one that actively breeds the scarcity and competition driving structural violence.
But what's the alternative they propose?
They push for a really radical structural change of the economy towards something they call a resource-based economy, or RBE.
RBE, resource-based economy. What does that look like?
The core idea, as they define it, is to declare all the world's resources as a common heritage of all the world's people.
Common heritage.
And then use scientific planning technology to actually meet human needs directly. The goal is to dismantle the incentives that create things like food deserts or inequality in the first place, moving beyond that illusion of scarcity.
So shifting from competing for limited stuff to collaborating with shared abundance.
That's the vision. And building on that, the sources also bring in Josiah Haltom's philosophy. He proposes redefining "in God we trust."
Redefining it? How?
Instead of trust being placed in the current financial system, which the sources see as part of the scarcity problem, it shifts trust towards eternal value, promising access, abundance, and everlasting life.
Okay, that's a big shift. Challenging the whole basis of fiat money from a different angle.
Definitely. And Haltom also uses this metaphor, the rapture of the state. which isn't like a religious thing in this context. It's a metaphor for moving beyond our current fragmented governments towards collective oneness, driven by a shared desire for what's termed redemption and guided by a law of common soul. It tries to connect that spiritual or value shift with the actual structural shift needed in governance.
Got it. So putting these pieces together, you've got deep ecology setting a new value foundation.
Valuing all life intrinsically.
Then the RBE offering a structural alternative to economics based on scarcity.
Right. Aiming for planned abundance.
And Haltom redefining trust and governance towards this idea of collective unity, of oneness.
Exactly. Together, these sources sketch out a pretty comprehensive, if radical, vision for a societal reset. They're basically arguing that this delirious reality, the suffering from structural violence, it's not inevitable.
It's a consequence, a result of specific systems built on specific values.
Correct. And why this deep dive matters, why you should care, is because it really challenges the bedrock assumptions of the world you live in. It presents a potential path, however ambitious, toward a more inclusive, cooperative future. One maybe free from suffering caused by, well, artificial scarcity and competition.
So if that path, as these sources outline it, really does require such a fundamental shift in our values, our structures, even how we understand trust, all leading towards this collective unity.
It leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? Given the sheer scale of change they're talking about, and that call for unity in the phrase, "Are we one?" Can we realistically, truly envision and actually enact this level of fundamental societal transformation